right, welcome back to another class. Let me make sure you can see everything here. And bring this up just a little so you can see all of that paper. Today we're going to be doing a little vase with some lilacs in it. Actually, I don't know. I'll have to check them. There we go. So I've got my paper put down. I'm not really going to draw anything in ahead of time. That way I can adjust accordingly. So we'll start off first mixing up a little bit of purple. So I'm going to use my ultramarine blue here. Let me wet these a little more. You can just dabble water on your pans, or if you've got a little spray bottle, that's fine too. I'm going to bring a little bit of my magenta over. And so here's where I can kind of adjust the color of purple I end up with. If I want it, more on the pink side or more on the blue side, I'm going to be using a combination of both. So I get some different tones and textures in there. All right. And so the first part, you can see I brought a little water in. I want this a little thinner, a little more soupy. I'm just going to lay in kind of the foundation of some of the flowers. So if I just come in, so you can see I've got it a little tapered and it's going to come wider. Again, I don't need to fill the whole thing in. If you look down in here, you do see a little bit of white space, and I want to keep part of that. Okay, and so if I want to have one coming off this way, I kind of tap that in, and then that one, I've got a cute little hook kind of coming down on it. And then I've got one that's kind of maybe going off towards the back side. Okay, I'm going to leave some open space here so I can work in a little bit of a leaf or two. And then here I'm going to have one kind of coming down that might even kind of cross over the front edge of that glass container that it's in. So I just want to work on basic shapes right now. You can kind of see what I'm going for. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit. So the key is when I'm starting to put in these leaf shapes, I want to be careful not letting them maybe run into each other. I want to leave little bits of white space between these. Kind of make sure it stays kind of fresh looking too, rather than bleeding together. So I'm going to use my Viridian Green, and I want to really deepen it up. So I'm going to be using my Burnt Umber, my darkest brown. Okay. All right. Keep it slightly on the wet side. So right now I'm almost kind of tapping out a little bit of the color that I've got. Okay. So here, if I start with a leaf over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the tip, kind of make that little serrated edge. I'm going to leave that center part open. I'm going to rinse out my brush, blot it out. Here's where I'll pick up a little yellow ochre. Okay. And I'm going to paint this in the middle until they kind of hit and touch each other. Just get like a nice little soft, variegated effect to that. And I'll come back over and darken these up more later, but I want to get that foundation in right now. So that's a process I'm going to use for each one. I'm going to pick up some of this deep green. Okay, I'm going to use kind of that tip to kind of work and do more of a serrated edge. Rinse it out, pick up some yellow ochre. So I try to get as much of that in the center before I start hitting where it bleeds, and I can even pull that yellow ochre out onto it. The thing I want to avoid is, having too much of a distinctive line between the two. That has a nice fade to it. This one has a little more of a distinctive line here, so I can kind of, mix those together and soften it up. All right, so here's where I want to be a little careful. So it's getting a little tighter, so I'll kind of, remember, we don't have to do a full leaf. I can come in and do kind of part of a leaf that's behind there. Bring that in. This is going to be kind of another partial leaf that's going to be, I should have left a little more space between there, but I can show you how we can make it work. And so maybe to balance out, I'm going to bring a leaf in, coming this way. And that's always the thing that you're looking for, balancing out what you have. Okay, bring in that yellow. Let's put a little hint of one maybe up here. Yellow. Okay. And so while this is still damp, this is where I can kind of come in along these edges here. Drop in a little more color, a little more intensity. I want to pull a bit of veining in. Again, I'm going to come and do that to each one. Remember, when your color, if it's drying out here, all you need to do is pick up a little extra water and kind of reconstitute it. Okay, so I'm going to wipe that out. Here's where I'm just damp brush. I'm just going to soften those inside edges. I kind of like that where it's a little darker on that new mix that I did. And that's a good thing. Like, I can come back in and layer those still some more. Long. Okay, I'm going to rinse out the brush and just damp brush now, where I'm just going to come and soften those little inside edges. So like when you see your bristles are separating, that usually means your brush is a little drier than what it needs to be. out. Damp brush, just soften the edges. So you can see I'm trying to pull it in, but I don't want to cover up all that yellow ochre that I put in. And last little bit here. Okay, tap that in. So if you can see, you know, I've got some that are touching, but I kind of maintained a little bit of space in between some of those areas. And just soften. So you can see, like, really I've done about everything I need to do to those leaves at this point. Maybe bring a little more yellow ochre into here. Okay. So I'm going to put the vase in next. I'm going to be using a little bit of the phthalo blue here. I'm just going to borrow a little bit of this yellow ochre, just that warms it up a little bit. And again, I want it nice and thin and light, so a good amount of water on this. I can always come back in and add in more. So when I think about my vase shape, okay, so if I kind of come here, then I want to see what fits with how everything else is positioned. So I'm just going to come like that, where I kind of have symmetrical sides. And then I'll give a little bit of curve to it at the bottom. And then I don't want to wait too long. I want to come in while this is wet and get rid of that line. So just using water, kind of using that little scrubbing motion to get rid of that edge there. And keep that nice and light inside here. Now I want to wait to do my stems because I don't want them to bleed. That's fairly wet right now. But if I want to come in and pick up a little more of the blue and maybe, you know, kind of strengthen up a little bit of color in here. On the edge. Here. Showing how that's kind of rounded. Then come in and soften this blue here. So while this is wet, this would be a good time. I've got little tiny hints of reflection in here, so I can pick up a little tiny bit of purple. It's not going to take much. I don't have, this isn't really close enough here, so I'll maybe stick a little bit in there. And then I just want to soften that. And I can do the same thing with a little bit of green. Just kind of a little bit of reflection on the glass. Okay. So I'm going to come back and work now on those flowers, and this is just going to be a matter of picking a bunch of colors and laying them in. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of use little cross hatches. I'm just going to build some texture in there. So I can take some that's a little more blue and think about like maybe down in here. Underside, some that are a little more pink. Okay, so it doesn't look like much right now, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to come now with a damp brush and just tap those a little bit to soften them out. we'll do another layer into these. So we'll kind of come and do a little bit of texture onto each one and soften it, and then we'll come back and do a final layer. Okay. So just a little cross hatching. Pick something that's a little more pink. Come in some that's a little more blue. Okay, rinse out my brush. Want to soften those a little bit. Okay. And continue on. So I'm not afraid to go, if I go out from that original border, it's just going to make them a little more light and airy when I'm doing a little more of this, you know, texture in here. So I can kind of see how that makes it look a lot more delicate. Pick up a little blue. Okay, so this, when I put these on, they were a little wetter, so this one doesn't need quite as much tapping out. But see, I'm not covering everything, so some of that original layer is still showing through. Okay, bring some blue underneath, a little darker, a little pink on top. And that one I probably don't need to tap out at all because it's already pretty soft. So you have to judge according to what it looks like when it goes on. So this layer, I want it textured but soft. And I'm going to come back again to this flower. And I'm going to do a little bit more of the same thing. So I'm going to do a little more color here again of my ultramarine blue and magenta. And that's again a reason why magenta is kind of crucial, because it gives me a lot more options on mixing things like purple, a lot brighter purple than what I can get from just using like the crimson color. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of keep this a little more delicate, and probably rather than doing the cross hatching, I'm going to just kind of do a little more dabbing. Magenta up here. It's just all about creating delicate texture. And a little more on the blue side up in here. And come out. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry a little. And if it's too hard, you know, you can always just kind of tap it. If it's looking too harsh or too polka dotty, just tap it a little bit with your brush and that'll soften it up. Okay. Okay, again. Okay, magenta towards the top. Remember, anytime that you're doing something like this, if you need to stop and pause the video to catch up, you know, I can work pretty quickly through this. So don't feel like, you know, like if you're getting behind. I'm trying to keep these in a certain time frame, and then you can work through at your own pace. I do have, if you like painting flowers, I do have some other florals. I've got a really cute lavender, some little poppies. So I hope that you'll kind of look through my channel and see what else might be of interest to you. You know, these are, like I said, great for daily practice. Even kids can do these. Okay, so here I'm going to probably just touch that with my brush a little bit, just to soften that. Okay. And then I'm going to put down a little bit of a shadow on the bottom. So let's kind of do the table part first. I'm going to use a little bit of that green, a little bit of this blue here. So if I lay in a line like that, I don't want to leave it that way. Nice and soft. And then I can bring, actually I can probably get kind of a gray color between these two. See how I was graying up right there? It's because, you know, this is kind of in the red purple family, and that's the green, and that's gonna give me a nice gray. So I can kind of lay, I need a little more than what I've got there. Got a little bit of a shadow in here. So this has had some time to dry, so I'll be safe to put a few stems in. Go back to my green. Like here's where, you know, you can kind of bring them different heights or lengths, I guess that would be. You can crisscross them a little bit. You just want to make sure that, you know, like you're kind of staying there within that opening of the vase. I would keep these really soft because they're going to be diffused in the like in the water. That's pretty about all I would do to those. You always have the option if you want to do a little bit of splattering. I still have plenty of this here, so again, put that. And then what I've done in here, this might be a little wet on this side, so maybe just stay over here, but I can dab in a couple little spots that might be some little, you know, those little, where these are made up of little tiny flowers. You know, maybe they've dropped here on the surface. You see, that's too wet to do that on this side. Actually, I'm just gonna blend that out, because I don't think that's gonna do anything for it. Here I've got a little bit of blooming. Come in with a dry brush. I kind of just soften that out a little bit. Alright, and there you go, a very cute little floral that has lots of contrast and vibrancy. I hope you take the time to check out my other videos and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next class.